Okay, well, here's my update to week two of my college experience. Yay, I finished 2 weeks so far. 4 more years to go. Yeah, I got a lot of work to do, but it was good. I'm enjoying my classes, enjoying what I'm doing. Um, so in week two, we learned a few really interesting things. My The Intro to Religious Studies class. I got all that homework done last week, so I didn't have anything to do this week for them. Because it's a 10-10 class. So if you're not familiar with how college works, or it's been a while, excuse me, what they do is they assign classes a number, and that number gives you an idea of like the difficulty of the class, like how much homework are you going to have, how involved are you going to need to be in doing that class. And so anyway, sorry, so many thoughts going through my mind. So the beginning numbers are in the thousands. So like 1010 is your basic 101 class. Okay. So that's 1010 is the same as 101. Basically, it's just a newer style. They switched back in the 90s away from the 101 to a 1010. Just added a zero to the end of everything, basically. So it's a basic class, and that's the intro to religious classes is a 1010. So it's a basic class. So it goes up in classes of 1,000. So a 2,000 level class is going to be more challenging than a 1,000 level class, and so forth. My Intro to Christianity class is a 3,000 level class. So it's busy. I've got like 4 or 5 modules of stuff to go through. So like this week, week two, we spent some time studying about Plato and Stoicism a little bit, and how Stoicism and Platonism came into contact with Christianity around the second century, third century time frame, and a lot of philosophy. So basically, philosophy and religion started to come together, and Plato had a huge impact in what was going on with Christianity. His writings helped affect a lot of people, especially a man by the name of Athanasius. If you ever hear his name, Athanasius is probably outside of the Christ and his apostles. Athanasius is probably one of the most influential men in early Christianity. I'd put him up there equal with the influence of Constantine in the as far as like how Christianity moved forward, how it progressed, what it did. Most of what we could call today traditional Christianity, especially Catholicism, Orthodoxy, uh, came from Athanasius. A lot of his philosophies did well, and were sustained at the ecumenical councils. So some fun stuff to learn there. So that's a 3,000 level class. So I've got like 3 chapters of books to read each week. I've got like extra readings to do, lots of stuff. The Chinese history class is 3480, so it's a 3,000 level class as well. So it's busy. I've got at least an hour of lecture to go through, several things to read, extra readings and stuff to do as well, other things to look at. So it's every week you've got new stuff coming all the time. So they're very busy classes. So they're more involved than the 1010 class. Just for perspective, I have a 6420 class next semester. It is graduate level. One of the professors recommended I take it to help me increase my chances of getting into graduate school, because you can't just join graduate school. You have to apply, and they only pick so many a year, kind of thing. Um, so he said that would doing that class and doing well in it would give me a leg up in getting into graduate school next year. So I'm doing the bachelor's level undergraduate stuff now, and then that's the one class that's graduate level I'm going to do next semester. And so, to give you an idea, 6,400 level class, we have 14 books to read in that class. So 14 books in 14 weeks. Thankfully, my professor gave me the list. I asked for it this week, got the list, and now I'm starting to read through those books as well. I got those acquired. I'm going to start reading them and to get them going. Um, so let's talk about some of the learnings, the things I've learned this week. We talked about Athanasius, talked about early Christianity a little bit more. We got into 4th century with Council of Nicaea, some of the things the Council of Nicaea went over. Something that's interesting about early Christianity, I guess I'd never thought about this in at least in the detail that we went into in class, is that Christianity, uh, there was two major questions that people needed answered, and this is where the Council of Nicaea did a lot of work on. And one of those questions is, who the heck is Jesus, basically? Um, there were a lot of people who had different opinions of it. Now think about this, realize this, okay? When you read the New Testament, there are two things that are important to understand. One is none of it was written by Jesus Christ himself. We don't have anything of him writing down anything. Basically, he didn't write anything down on parchment. He didn't say, here's my teachings, okay, now go take them out to people, study this, and go share it. He talked with his apostles. And what we have are writings of people who knew the apostles. There is no technical proof that really any of the actual 12 apostles wrote the books in our New Testament. John, I think there's an argument to be made that John, the apostle, wrote Revelations and the Gospel of John, at least, if not 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. We do have 1st and 2nd Peter, but again, scholars aren't sure. They can't confirm that he actually wrote that. So there's a controversy around that. Matthew, a lot of people want to say that the book of Matthew is written by Matthew, the apostle, who is the tax collector, but scholars can't prove it. It was him that wrote it. In fact, what's interesting is even if Matthew wrote the book of Matthew, then why did he copy Mark? Mark was the first gospel written. And anyways, I'm getting off track, but we're going to go into all that in the intro to Christianity, intro to the New Testament videos we're going to be doing here shortly for our gospel study courses on the Bible. As we're finishing up the Old Testament, we're going to be doing New Testament here soon. So go watch that video to learn more. But anyways, here's the thing, is we don't have original writings in the New Testament, and so we don't have it. Everything is secondhand understanding Christ. And so by the time we get in the 3rd and 4th century, everybody's going, who really is this guy? We've got some different reports about this guy. He obviously is divine, but then there's other people who are writing these gospels of Christ or other gospels, like the Gospel of Judas or Gospel of Thomas and things that are Gnostic works. But some of them claim he's just a man. So what is it? Is Jesus Christ a man, or is he divine? And this divided a lot of churches. This is where a huge problem came in. There were two major ideas that came out of this. There was, I want to say docetism. It wasn't dualism. I think docetism is the right word. Excuse me. So anyways, there's two ideas that came about. Docetism was the one that survived and did the most. And what it means is that Jesus Christ is a human, but he also is divine. But it's like there's two types of Christs in one body. There's a human Christ and there's a divine Christ in one body, basically, and they don't necessarily intermingle. It's like competing personalities inside. And then the other one was monophysite, I think is how it's monophysite or something like that. How it's pronounced. I'm right off the top of my head, I can't think about it. But and that one is that Christ was human and divine, but it was all one person, fully human, fully divine in the same person, no separations at all. That's the version that didn't win in the Council of Nicaea. That's the one that was pushed to the side, but that's the version that the Oriental Orthodox Church adopted. So when we think of the Coptic Church, Coptic Christian Church in Egypt, not England, Egypt, the Ethiopic Church, all those churches in Africa, on the continent of Africa, they went with the monophysite version. And they were the ones that did, and so that's their, Jesus is divine and human all wrapped into one, no separations. What we would call the Orthodox way to think about it was the Docetist one. I think. Okay, now I'm confused on my terms. But anyways, there was God. Jesus is divine and human, like two personalities in one body. And so there's a divine side to him and a human side to him, and that was the one that won orthodoxy. So that's the one that Catholicism and things go on with, and was quite common even in paintings and pictures. If you ever see a picture of Christ that looks kind of gothic or kind of a old style picture, and if you look at his face, if his face is asymmetrical, meaning one side of his face doesn't look exactly the same as the other side of his face, that is a painting that matches with this philosophy of dualism. Basically, he's human, but he's also divine, and they put it into their paintings. Actually, you can see the difference. So if you look at some of those pictures, you'll see, oh, that was the dualist belief, that was a monophysite belief. So really interesting ideas. And then the other one was, now that we're trying to come together, figure out who Christ is, but who's God? Because there's a problem with this. God in the Old Testament is singular, especially if you read it in Greek. It is singular. If you read it in Hebrew, it's not guaranteed to be singular, because the word in Hebrew that was commonly used in the Old Testament is Elohim. Elohim can be generally used as a singular version of God, but it can also mean plurality, gods. So there's more of a distinction in the Hebrew side versus the Greek side. The Greek side, it just all became God. So if you read like in the creation period, some of the early works talk about the gods organizing this. Like there was a council of gods that helped organize and deal with creation. Whereas in the Greek version, which is where we get a lot of stuff for the King James version, it's singular. So anyways, the challenge is the Old Testament, God is singular. There isn't another God there. In fact, he's constantly telling the Jews about worshiping other gods. Stop worshiping other gods. He's not saying those gods are, he's just saying don't worship them, basically. But the thing is, when they get to New Testament times, remember the New Testament didn't exist during the New Testament times. It was written afterwards. The challenge is okay, so we believe that there's this God, but then there's this guy Jesus who comes down, and he's divine, so he's kind of like God. He's got some divinity, and if he saves us, especially from our sins, he has godlike powers. And so who is he? What is this relationship? And then there's this Holy Spirit that we hear about too, that manifests people, the day of Pentecost and other things. And even Christ talks about the Spirit witnessing of his divinity and other things. So we've got these three things, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. How do we reconcile these together? And so this is where the Council of Nicaea really did. It's interesting, 80% of the Council of Nicaea was on Christology, the study of Christ, who was Christ. But the one thing that everybody remembers the Council of Nicaea for is the Trinity. And the Trinity was because they had two major philosophies, again, coming out in Christianity at the time, talking about, we believe that who God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost are. What's that relationship? Some people believe they were separate. Some people believe they was all the same thing. And so when in an effort to try to pull these together, they basically try to find a way to match them in the middle, basically. And that's why if you've ever read the Nicene Creed or the Trinity statement in it, it talks about they're all one substance, but yet we talk about them in we separate them out in our language and in three different entities, but it's the same. And so it's kind of this back and forth. It's interesting. I've read it before. I've studied it before. It doesn't seem any clearer to me now than it did before, truthfully speaking. And I don't mean to make light of this if you are of a member of a church that believes in the Trinity. But if you read it, it's hard to. It's not clear. And in fact, it's interesting in the book. I think it's in the book History of Christian Theology by Platcher, I believe is the author of that one. That's one of the books that we're reading in the class. He made a comment in there that when the 300 scholars that were in that council that helped write the Trinity belief out, basically, when they wrote that out, even those 300 scholars, when they went back to their hometowns, they couldn't explain it to the people. It's confusing when you read it. So you have to interpret what they're trying to say. Basically, that's where most people get their understanding of the Trinity, is they interpret what they were trying to say. They're trying to say, well, here's what I think they meant to say, and that's where we get our understanding of the Trinity from. Really interesting. I mean, it took a long time, and it wasn't even settled. The Council of Nicaea didn't settle it. They had other councils to go over it. In fact, at one of the councils, they actually had more Eastern Orthodox rather than Western Orthodox Christians at the council. They kind of like did this roundabout, sneaky, hey, we're gonna stockpile, we're gonna pile a whole bunch of Eastern Orthodox people in here and minimize the Western Orthodox people. So guess who gets the vote? The Eastern Orthodox philosophy. And so they changed it to go that way. And then they're like, well, okay, we got to reverse that because that was kind of sneaky and underhanded. And they had to reverse it again. So it's been changed and it's disputed for hundreds of years. And to this day, still can't say it's completely understood. And there's still other, lots of other churches have different philosophies and ideas. It's interesting because the Trinity stands in quite contrast with, for LDS at least, with the first vision. When Joseph Smith saw his first vision, he saw God the Father and Jesus Christ as two separate people, two separate entities, two separate beings completely. They looked similar, but they were separate. And so his first vision just is a whole nother perspective that just completely different than the Trinity. So it was fun. We got into some good stuff. We actually talked about martyrdom as well. This is really an interesting point. One of the side articles that we had to read for the Christianity class was about martyrdom. Martyrdom has an interesting history, and I'd heard a little bit about this, but this gave a lot more clarity to the idea of martyrdom. You see, when after Christ and his apostles, there was a lot of persecution. They had Nero, of course, was a big persecutor of theirs. Rome wasn't a big fan of the Jews, anyways. At any period of time, and then they still kept having problems. They still had other Roman leaders and other people. Even during Constantine, they still had rulers. It wasn't till Constantine that the rulers stopped persecuting the Christians. When he finally nationalized it, basically said, okay, Christianity is legit, we're cool. That's when persecution changed. So during the first and second centuries, and really up through the third century, into the fourth century, that would put it so the fourth century is the 300s AD, basically. Martyrdom was a good thing. They saw martyrdom as a way to salvation. So if you died for your beliefs, you got extra bonus points in heaven, and that helped you to gain your salvation. So it was important to die as a martyr. Basically, it was the thing to do. And there were some stories of some people who died as martyrs, and they're like, I'm going out this way. They're being beat up, and they'll grab their spear, and they'll take their own life in a way, or help the person take their life. And people were willing to die. Like, they were like, oh, I'm willing to die to be a martyr. I'm willing to do this. And oh my gosh, it was like a big deal. It was a thing. It was a part of your Christian philosophy, was to die for your beliefs. So it was a very popular thing. Well, after Constantine basically legalized Christianity, after he made it a legit religion and not a persecuted religion, this concept of martyrdom had to change, because now they weren't getting persecutions. So now it's like, okay, what do we do? How do we get saved? We actually have to be good. We actually have to follow the rules of it. And some people were like, well, we can still do some martyrdom stuff. So this became something that happened. It wasn't, some people encouraged it and some didn't necessarily. It wasn't 100% the whole Christian community went this way. But some prominent people did push this. And what the idea is to create your own martyrdom. And what that means is you would go out and you would find a non-Christian group, and you would basically destroy their church. You would take down their altars and destroy the idols and burn the building, or do, you would basically persecute these people who believe different than you, the pagan groups. And they would get mad and they would kill you because you destroyed their stuff. You now died as a martyr. You died defending your beliefs, basically. So this was kind of making the conditions of martyrdom happen. So it wasn't like, hey, this group just hates Christians, and we're going to come accuse you and trap you, and if you don't deny your beliefs, we're going to kill you. Okay, that it's not like them doing the attacking and aggression against the Christians. It was the Christians attacking them, going, "Yeah, I'm willing to die as a martyr. Go ahead, kill me. I'm excited." And then the other groups, I think the other groups started realizing this and went, "Nah, we're not going to kill you," and that totally destroyed the Christians because they're like, "What do I do now? You're denying me martyrdom. You're denying me my salvation," and it went kind of went wild there for a little bit. So martyrdom changed, and I think this was. We're going to get into the Crusades here in a little bit, I believe, but I don't know if it's this next in week 3 or week 4. We're getting close to the Crusades, but I think this is kind of the idea of what started the concept of the Crusades, and this is not an uncommon idea. If even you look at Islam, when you look over at Islam, they have that idea of jihad. If you die, in the effort of killing infidels, you are saved in a way, and that's kind of where this happened in the fourth, fifth, sixth centuries. So they had to kind of create the conditions for martyrdom, and it didn't always work out. But persecuting, like violently persecuting other people so they would kill you, was a thing. That was a thing back then, which is crazy. But thankfully, we don't do that anymore today. So those are some interesting ideas in Christianity. I know this is getting a little long, sorry, a lot of fun stuff to talk about. The Chinese history class. So we're getting into the dynasties. The dynasties are starting up. Shi dynasty, XI is the XIA actually, is or Z, dynasty is the kind of a pre-dynasty basically in China. They're the original group of people, and they kind of grew up around the Yellow River Valley area. And then there's the Shang dynasty, which became next, and they kind of migrated a little bit further east, if I remember correctly on the map. Sorry, Professor, if you're watching this and I'm getting this wrong. I believe the Shang went to the east a little bit further and settled there, and then the Zhou dynasty went the opposite direction, basically went away from the coast up a little bit further inland for their dynasty. Fascinating stuff. Just this is the idea of there's lots of people all over the area, and they're organizing themselves into kingdom and trying to pull people together. And how do we establish our kingdom? How do we build a nation? How do we do this? And this was a common thing that was happening in that time frame anyways. With, if you look back, this is what, 20, what was it, 20, somewhere around 2400, 2500 BC time frame is when the dynasties start to really catch on in China. That's not uncommon for Abraham's time, practically Abraham's time in the, or even a little before Abraham's time in the Old Testament. So early Genesis, basically, that we're seeing this, and they're getting started. And it is really interesting that values was a huge, important thing. That you had to have these values. You had to be somebody who had a lot of integrity, and you're caring for your people. And I think it's really interesting that those were the qualities they look for in a ruler. Part of the reason there's so many different dynasties and challenges in China, there's technically 24 dynasties, but from what it sounds like, there's more than that in reality. But 24 is a nice even number, so they kind of cut out some of the smaller dynasties to get to that point. The dynasties would change. So there was this idea that came up in the first dynasty, the Shang dynasty, of the mandate of heaven. This mandate of heaven basically was an indication you're a good person as the ruler, so you get a rule. You have the right to rule from heaven. We all believe that heaven is endorsing you to do this because you have the good integrity and things. And then from there, if major natural disasters happened, they would see that as a sign. Nope, heaven's canceled the mandate. You're out. We got to pick somebody else, and that's when the next dynasty would come in. Usually after major natural disasters, or if they've lost major battles or other things, famines and stuff would happen, and then they'd be like, nope, new leader, and a new dynasty would start. So it was kind of an interesting little arbitrarily way to do that, but I can't say it's really that much any better than any other succession program in another country. But they kind of started to do, they want to do like the idea of the father son idea, but if the son was a jerk, then they pick somebody else. But it's cool to think about that in China, integrity and honesty are values that they looked for in their leaders. They wanted their leaders to be people who were concerned about the average person, concerned about doing what's right for the greater good, not what can I do to enrich myself kind of an idea. So it's really interesting that those were the original values of China. Um, I can't say that they're following that to this day, honestly. With the Communist Party in there right now, Xi Jinping, uh, I think I just said that wrong. Anyways, um, I again can't say that any other country is any better than them, honestly, in integrity of government at this time. But it's really interesting as we're getting into this idea, of the dynasties. They're starting to come together. They're forming these groups to build what we would know, as China, as this big empire, this big opportunity. So some fun stuff that we're learning in there as well. So stay tuned. We'll do another update next week for week 3 as well. It looks like some more good stuff we're going to learn there also. If you have comments or questions about what I've talked about, feel free to put them in there, and I'll try to answer them to clarify anything. If there are certain questions you have about these kinds of things, let me know. Yeah, put it in the comments and I'll help you out with that. So hopefully you're enjoying these videos as I'm learning and going through these classes. So we'll talk to you later.